So here we are. We're looking at the frosting of Lightroom. We're not dealing with anything else but histogram and that top panel. You've seen this panel. If you click on nothing here, like unclick these are the basic panels you see. You check any one of these boxes or click on them, it'll change this panel to something else as it works with the radiant filter, as it works with the spot tool, or as it works with the local adjustments brush. And so this guy is the basic panel that loads up by default on all of your images. So now I want you guys to remember these things, and that's it. There's nothing else you have to memorize. There's nothing else that you need to put to a hardcore lesson of let's get out some note cards and practice it and go, okay, shadows is this, blah, 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 blah. The definition of whites is this, blah, 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 blah. I don't want you guys to go crazy. I just need you to remember these few things. And let's break this down. First off, right here in this section, this is white balance. As you look up here, white balance is approached by changing your temperature from 0 to 5,000 or whatever it ends up being. I think this isn't 0. I think it's like 3,000, 2,000. I think it goes down to 2,000 up to about tens of thousands. Then you got the tint, which is going to be right in the middle of a +6, +3, depending on your camera. Depending on how it comes in, like my color profile, Adobe Color, it chooses on default, I think, +6. But I don't worry about that because I'm changing that first thing in all of my images. I change the lens profile correction, and then I go in and start doing my white balance. So as I'm working on white balance, these are the only two things that I'm adjusting. I just adjust those, match them up the way I want, and then you go from there. In this particular example, everything's on default, and so this isn't anything. You know, in fact, I bet that +3 is a default color. So these guys right here are all set to nothing, but I just want to break it down. The next thing to worry about is the sky and ground that you're going to adjust at the exact same time. You're doing some global changes to see how the sky and ground come out of it. You bring in that slider of exposure up, you're affecting both the sky and the ground at the same time, and you want to make them look good together. One exposure setting might be great for the sky, but then your ground looks terrible because now you're making your ground look bad. And we can kind of bring that back with other elements, but keep an eye on both the sky and ground as you're changing the slider of exposure and contrast. And I almost always bring my exposure up a little bit because I just want to bring out more stars, bring out more color, more light, and I just go up a little bit from 30 plus like 0.30 to 0.85. Somewhere around there is a good range to play around with. So remember that this section of here on this screen, this section of this basic tool set is dealing with the sky and the ground. So remember, this over here was white balance. This section does sky and ground edits. And then now we're looking at just foreground. Which elements on here are going to be foreground focused? Now, when I say focused, what I mean is that when I change them, am I looking at how the stars look? No. I'm looking at the foreground. I'm going to look at my ground, my black horizon, my black silhouettes of trees, anything there that's in my foreground. I'm going to be looking at that when I adjust the shadows brush, while I adjust the blacks, the texture, and the clarity. All of those are being adjusted based on foreground benefit. If there's a benefit to my foreground, I keep it. Then these guys are my stars. These elements, highlights, whites, dehaze, they're going to bring out my stars in a good way. Too much, too little, you never quite know. So you look at it and go, well, if I go here, I like how the stars look in their highlights. Okay, leave that. Now let's play with the whites. Negative, positive, ooh. I liked it more in positive right here, but not too much. It got kind of crazy if I went too high. Okay, perfect. Dehaze. All right, let me look at this. Let me try and change this. And there's one tool in the dehaze slider when you're working on the dehaze slider that I'm going to show you that you want to make sure you emphasize, and that comes up here in a minute. So next is this, the color stretch. Color stretch. Oh wait, vibrance and saturation I thought was all about how the color looked and enhanced the color. Well, here's the thing. I can say enhanced, but when you hear enhanced, and I told you it's 1% enhanced versus 100% enhanced, which one automatically sounds better? 100% enhanced. If I said this was 100% enhanced and that one's only 1% enhanced, you would think that one's okay, but this one's great. Well, that's not what's happening here in your images. If you go from vibrance or saturation to 100% max, you haven't just become better. It hasn't just gone from okay to great to greater to better. That's not how it works. This is better described as a color stretch, because when I say this has been 1% stretched or this has been 100% stretched, you might think in your head, sometimes stretching things 100% can break it, can be too much. 1% stretch might be enough. And so as you stretch, it's good, and then it can get worse and worse and worse depending on the image. Stretching it can be terrible, and it can be fantastic. So look at this as a color stretch. We are going to stretch the color with vibrance and stretch the color with saturation just enough in a way that's going to be helpful to our image and not break it. And people break their images all the time. So you got to be subtle. So then what is the overarching key to all of this? As you're sliding any one of these sliders, especially the dehaze slider, I want you to do one thing. And you know what? If you don't memorize that this section's white balance, this section's sky and ground, this one's just foreground, this one's just stars, and this one's a color stretch, if you don't memorize all that, memorize this. Boom. Look, I moved even everything up just so I can emphasize.